Wake me up before you go, because this is Voyager Please, a hateful voyage to the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
And I'm a guy who normally records podcasts on Thursday, but I'm here on a Tuesday because Wednesday is going to be Cyberpunk Day. Peter.
Yes. In the year 2020, this may be the only thing that brings us all together. It is... The day we were recording this is December 8th, 2020, and in the United States, starting at 7 o'clock Eastern, Cyberpunk is officially released in this country tomorrow, and Peter has permitted me, Joseph, to use my I don't have kids privilege to no life a video game for 2 days after I got work off, and agreed to record a couple days early. So thank you, Peter. I appreciate this favor you've done me.
It's the least I can do. I've certainly gone deep in the weeds on video games myself, and while I cannot commit to the full balls deepness that you're going to go on this thing, I'll be there playing right alongside. Yeah, it's the one thing maybe in 2020 that can really just bring. And what's crazy to me is when I talk to other nerds out there, I know some people are building computers or whatever, and they're like, oh, here's all the stuff I wanted, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, well, this will get you through it. But, you know, Cyberpunk. And they're like, what's Cyberpunk? And it's like, what rock are you living under? I look at them the same way someone's like, you didn't hear that aliens invaded, or that, you know, time travel was a thing, or that bombs fell and Eurasia is gone now. Like, this is life. This is a big fucking deal.
I think the game has the level of hype that it has, not just because of the pedigree of its developers, but also that the cyberpunk aesthetic, like the Gibson novel aesthetic, if you will, has always been incredibly popular, but has never had good pop culture properties to deliver it. And this is the promise of a Gibson novel you can play that's very interactive, that has a very lived-in world. And that's turned out to be like, people are hungry for that every time it rolls around, like Altered Carbon, for example.
Yeah. And I mean, you could point to Deus Ex, right? And say that established it and that did it, but it's just the scale and the scope is...
Right, yeah. It's different when it, you know, those games are great, but they're very on rails. I guess the modern iterations in particular, which I think definitely capture that aesthetic far better. You know, they're still pretty linear games. This is an open world, you know, hundreds of hours, very Rockstar-esque in that element, although not necessarily in the gameplay, which is more roleplay oriented. The incredible customization of your character rather than you're playing the protagonist and
you want to have boobs and a dick, you know?
Yeah, whatever, you know, it's the future.
3 balls. 3. I know what you're saying. Hey, I thought this was a Star Trek podcast, but let me counter this by saying that if this was Delta Flyer, you would still have another 6 to 7 minutes of them shilling their premium Patreon content before they actually talked about anything Star Trek either. So
they're very heavy on the revenue generation, and we just want to talk to you about a game that you were already going to play. But speaking of incredibly destructive devices falling from the sky, since it's something you already mentioned, what episode did we watch this week?
Season 6, episode 7, Dragon's Teeth. This, you asked me at the end of the last episode to not read anything out of the memory alpha.
Correct.
Spoil it, which, watching the episode, I forgot that you had made that request, and it wasn't until I was going to do my pre-podcast homework that it dawned on me. While I was watching the episode, there's some big fingerprints that I saw, and now that I'm putting 2 and 2 together, I've got some predictions I'll make a little later in. But this is an interesting episode. This, I could tell, was a money episode. This episode left me feeling at the end like I just watched like some 80s cartoon where they're getting into like second season and now they need to launch like wave 2 of the toy line. And they're like, now here's the new threat. Look at how badass these guys are. Look at their fucking spaceships. Look at this shit. Go out and tell your mom to buy these toys because the Thundercats need to fight these new frog guys.
And all the good guys will get like new attachments and like accessories you got to buy to be able to fight the new villains. Like
now they
it's
got
the new line
cyber
of Megazords for the new season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm. The green Power Rangers shown up to like help them, and I don't know who that would really be. Oh, it's a new character that's joined the crew to help them combat the dreaded whatever these
Who was
guys
a bad guy turned into a good guy, seems a little OP. I think we all know who that is.
Neelix.
And-
This is a great Neelix episode too, man. Like we've been asking for him to come back for a while, and I think he does a good job in this.
Sometimes, Peter, I wish that we did this in a fully visual medium, like a video podcast, because I would love to like drop in the Always Sunny in Philadelphia like theme song right here and have the title card, "The gang accidentally wakes up a bunch of Kirkland brand Cardassian evil space Hitlers." Like,
it's interesting that you call them Cardassians, because I've certainly felt like the neck ridgy, like kind of almost like cobra, whatever the fuck the crown of a cobra or whatever that.
They look like a bunch of snakes.
They do look snaky. They look snaky, but they've also got the Klingon ridges on their heads. What are these guys called? They're
the Vodwar.
Vodwar, that's right. But they got the Klingon ridges, and the one dude like sitting there like with a pitch and a tent about the Klingons. I'm gonna call these guys. At first, I was gonna call them the Cardalongs, like Cardassian Klingons, but I think the Klingassians. The Klingassians.
I think this episode slaps. I really do. I think that they tried to introduce a cool sci-fi idea into the constant blunderings of the Starship Voyager as it careens from Delta Quadrant planet to Delta Quadrant planet, living nothing but misery in their wake. And them happening across this race of secret super villains and waking them up. On brand for our boys in the Federation. It's what they do.
Living Witness? Remember Living Witness? The warship Voyager that just comes through and causes pain and suffering for everyone? Yeah, here you go. We open up with money falling out of the sky. Lots and lots of money.
So much money.
The CG attack sequences that we get in this are, I think they hold up well for 2020. Like you could tell they put some real money into this. You've got a nice looking futuristic alien planetscape, and you just have photon torpedoes flying out of the sky, taking out skyscrapers, blowing shit up. It's wild. I was like, damn, this is like the first time I think we've ever seen something this harsh right out of the gate with Voyager.
Yeah, planetary bombardment stuff like this is pretty rare in the franchise, and you can tell the difference between old CG that had money behind it and old CG that didn't, based on the animation.
Yeah.
And I think that's what helps like keep it seem very current, even though the resolution on it's not very good. Like the effect obviously is nothing compared to what you could do now. The animation's crisp and everything flows together well in it, and it just feels like, oh yeah, this is pretty good still.
It's detailed. There's a lot of different shit. It's not like that garbage out of Barge of the Damned where you've got 6 things being pictured and they all look like crap. So no, it's not every day that Voyager opens to orbital bombardment. You don't know what's happening here, but you know that someone has decided that this place needed to be nuked from orbit because it's the only way to be sure.
Yeah, and it's happening. Like the city's half destroyed already. You've got whole parts of buildings just blown out, and the bombardment is continuing.
Now you cut down to this might be 900 years ago. Spoiler alert, but I know the caves when I see the caves. But these aren't just any old Voyager Planet Hell caves. These are techno caves. These are caves with a poured concrete floor. These are caves with little steel girders and stasis tubes and blinky lights and scientists or whatever these guys are going to end up being. You see a man and a woman, and the woman seems to have some apprehension. The guy had to cut a bunch of life pods loose because he had no choice. There was some power fluctuation. And the lady's putting up a little bit of a fight about getting into her stasis pod. And he says, listen, honey, everything will be fine. It's only 5 years. And that's when I wrote my notes like, no
and
way.
Narrator, it will not be 5 years.
Yeah, not at all.
Nah, it's like the very first thing what kind of story you're going to be dealing with. If someone makes that kind of guarantee, it's like, how many millennia eons into the future is this actually going to pay off?
You're talking about the Sonny and Philly smash cuts. Like, here's where you insert that title card. Like, it'll only be 5 years. Do. The title is The Gang Goes 900 years in the future.
It's exactly 892 years in the future. We are reintroduced to the travails of the USS Voyager because it is accidentally dropped into a music video for a 90s techno band. Like, I could just feel like Sandstorm by Daruti in the background of this fucking like vortex CG. Like, of all the CG in this episode, this is the stuff that looks the worst.
Yeah, so they're like in this wormhole and they're flying, but there's a bunch of trash bouncing around the wormhole. This is not the clean, well-maintained wormholes that you're used to. This is like the Detroit freeway of wormholes. There's potholes so big in this wormhole that it will take the rim right off of your landing struts. And Voyager's not there by choice. They got sucked in. Janeway got called into the bridge, and she's like, what's going on? And everybody's kind of pretty, seems to be taking it super serious. But while they're flying around this thing, they see a manned vessel, which at first I thought was going to be someone who else is stranded there. But no, you get these like bone face
Skeletor motherfuckers, as you said last week.
Yes, Skeletors. Now, not the Chakotay retrograde virus from the Space Elf kind of Skeletor. Like, these are Skeletors.
Yeah, straight up like a bone mask.
And they're not nice dudes. They say, hey, get the fuck out of here. And they're like, we're in here by accident. Can you help us? And they're like, yeah, we'll help you. So they like phase pulse them and knock them out of the stream. And then they jump out and say, all right, now drop your shields because we're going to board you and we're going to delete all evidence of that little wormhole. And Janeway's like, no, fuck that.
At first, she tries to negotiate. She's like, hey, thanks for pushing us out. Any chance we can like bargain with you to like travel through these? Because we accidentally went 200 light years and it was in 5 minutes. And that's something we're super in the market for. So let's make a deal. And then his response to that is no, and also fuck you, which delivers the all important stakes of the episode for Voyager. Is that there is for what feels like the millionth time, a shortcut home dangled in front of them.
That's all I need to be invested, man.
No, it's the purpose of the show. I'm not saying that because I'm saying they shouldn't do that. I'm saying we're here again. Like, here's another opportunity. They have to do this every once in a while to like tease it, but you don't want to do too many.
But more to that point, I mean, you can play this card as many times as you want, and it doesn't get old. And even though I know it's Gilligan's Island, like all the coconut teleportation devices and whatever other goofy things they come up with, the carrot you're dangling in front of Voyager's face, like, yeah, they can't grab it every time, but it sets realistic stakes that keeps me invested. It's not some bullshit multiphasic probe dilemma they pulled out of their ass. Like, this is what we're here for. And whatever silly series of events you're going to roll out in front of me, I can say, as long as it's in the pursuit of the meta plot, getting home, cool, I'm there. Let's do it.
I think you can have too much of this. I don't agree with you that it's always the right call. I think what's more interesting is the incremental steps, right? So as they get closer, they're going to have specific episodes where it's about really like permanent achievements that show a more of a connection or a closeness to home that seem more durable and fitting within the story rather than these temporary carrots. I think that's my dividing line. But anyway, the carrot is on the table.
I'm saying that shouldn't be every single episode of Voyager, but I'm saying anytime they play it, it works for me, and I have much more suspension of disbelief for zany plot antics when this is on the table.
Speaking of zany plot antics, the Skeletors have escalated to a phaser fight with Voyager very quickly. And so they are putting a hurt on Voyager, as is often the case with its inconsistent portrayal of its combat prowess. The Skeletor people apparently can immediately start dropping Voyager's shields into the low 20s and 30s. So they gotta make for cover.
The problem is that the Skeletor people have very maneuverable ships that Tuvok is not able to target with the phasers, and maybe Voyager does have better guns, but if they can't hit the targets, it's not doing them any favors.
They decide to take cover in a nearby planet that they just so happen to pop out next to, that they note is got a lot of radiogenic particles within the atmosphere that they think they can essentially use to lose the Turay ships that are chasing them. They don't really offer a reason why they think like the Skeletor people will be less resistant to radiation than them. It's just a wild guess. They're like, I don't know, we're getting shot at and we're going to get exploded if we're not careful here. So why don't we see if this works?
Janeway's
but
like,
it does.
We got two options. One is we try to hide in this radiation cloud, or two is my old standby, which is blow the ship up. So we'll give option 1 a shot.
Option 3 of have Chakotay go on a dream quest does not seem applicable here. Option 4 of have 7 of 9 solve it
with singing.
Apparently, it was just not on the table that day. The planet that they wind up taking refuge on is, of course, as you would expect, the one that we saw in the pre-credit sequence, and most importantly is a completely nuked out wasteland. Like there's gamma radiation, we see a ruined cityscape, and actually also see Voyager sit down within it. Kind of like
no code blue either. They just land on that red alert. And I was so distracted by the nuclear apocalypse that had visited this planet that I was like, oh, wait a minute. Wow, Voyager's actually landing on the surface. This is like landing number 4. There was Demon 87s, or what was that fucking stupid one?
37s.
37.
That episode would have been way different if it was a bunch of people from 1987. Instead of like Amelia Earhart and Tackleberry and random Japanese Imperial guy, it could have been Ronald Reagan, Mr. T, Alf.
And Tom Paris getting addicted to crack. I found the newest gimmick to get the ship hooked on. Here's the newest
20th century
cocaine.
Crack cocaine, guys. And talking about needing an Always Sunny tease, the gang discovers crack cocaine.
So yeah, they land the ship, man, and it's this is like the 4th. I think it's the 4th time. So a big deal in and of itself. And every time they land Voyager, it looks significantly better than the last time they landed it. So that's cool. I'm kind of like, all right, so you got dudes up in orbit. You're landing on the surface of a planet that's been orbital bombarded to bejesus and back. And you're just landing there on the surface. Like, this doesn't seem like a great plan. Why aren't the Skeletor people continuing to like just shoot photon torpedoes down? Spoiler alert, they draw that conclusion later on and start hammering them. But for right now, things are safe. And they do their little scan, and they're like, wow, everybody's dead. But hey, wait, I just found the Bat Cave, and it's packed full of stasis pods. And Janeway's like, oh my God, let's go check it out. Hey, we're in a red alert firefight. I'm going to take our tactical officer and also the smartest person on the ship who should realistically be making repairs. And we're going to go check out a Bat Cave full of Peter's favorite thing in Voyager, and that's stasis pods. Yep. Good old-fashioned Juggalo tech rearing its ugly head. We're talking, of course, of the Thaw and the stasis pods, which solve so many problems for so many Voyager plots. And there they are.
That they built enough of to put every single member of the crew on, remember?
I remember.
Where are those? Where did they put them? They put their full stock of shuttlecraft, and they like They turned the stasis pods into shuttlecraft? Like, what happened? What happened to 136 stasis pods?
They became 136 photon torpedoes.
No, that came from the Equinox, because they got all the treasure chests with the photon torpedoes in it. We've established that. There's a story. What there is not a story for is how it is we go from this planet is a radiation-filled hellhole to, hey, let's go unprotected into this unknown alien landscape where there might, be potentially dangerous, poison gas in the air.
Rad roaches, or what were the zombies called?
Oh, ghouls?
Rad ghouls? Was that what the glowing ones were?
Well, the glowing ones were the super ghouls, but they were just ghouls.
They go to the nuclear wasteland of Fallout 3. I'll cut them a break, and maybe they scanned the target destination and saw that it was like super reinforced, yet somehow the transporter is able to transport them. And in reality, it's because you and I know that there's only 2 spacesuits that were made for first contact. So that's the only 2 spacesuits Voyager has access to. And if they're going to bring 3 people, they can't have 3 people in 2 suits. So
they make their way into the concrete floor chamber and find the stasis pods. They note that the male occupant of the pods we saw earlier is alive and within the pod. Janeway and Tuvok resolve to investigate further, but for 7 of 9 hesitates and then impulsively decides to reanimate this person, which ends up being a story through line for the rest of the episode, and I think a underappreciated, compelling idea, which is why 7 of 9 did it.
It is a head scratcher, and it really kind of identifies a inconsistency in her character, and that she is so protocol oriented and loves rules and procedures, yet she veers off of them so frequently, subverting the command structure authority and causing problems. So in this episode, I think they, like you just said, they do a good job of kind of justifying why is it that someone who loves rules and regulations would so frequently go off script. And it's because there's a guilt component. She wants to do good, and she's ultimately a child.
The jumping off point for me on why I like this part of the episode is that it provides a lot of contrast between earlier 7 of 9, who is very rigid in regards to efficiency and uncaring, in the slow character development that we've had since then of her making connections with people, trying to mature on an emotional level beyond the stunted childlike growth that she was able to experience. And in this case, it manifests in an impulse of, I want to help these people, which is uncommon for her because, first she didn't care about anything, and then she really only cared about a few people, then she cared about Voyager, and now she's learning to have empathy in general. But as you alluded to, she hasn't found a way to regulate that 100% effectively yet.
So, yeah, she goes up to the nearest stasis pod, wipes some shit off the screen, deactivates it, and thaws the sky out. So Janeway comes up like, hey, I didn't tell you to do that. And Tuvok's like, these guys might be hostile and spitting acid or whatever. But instead we're greeted with someone who seems pretty even keel at first. He explains that his culture had been swarmed by its enemies and attacked, that they knew that the attack was coming, and that this super bat cave was kind of a last-ditch preparation to have a continuity plan in place, that they were only supposed to be out for 5 years, and obviously it's been much longer, but that kind of gets fleshed out in sickbay. At first, he's just like, oh god, it's been 900 what? Stumbles over to the other pod with the woman in it. They crack it open. It pops apart. You see a skeleton in there. And he's like, oh no, that's so-and-so. She was my wife. In the most no big deal voice possible. And that's like the first red flag that goes up for you.
Quadrant is his name. And his next scene is on Voyager. It's in the sick bay. He's interacting with the doctor, and then interacts with Seven and Janeway when they come in, and we get the first kind of tidbits of information about their backstory, how long it's been. He knows what the Borg are, but the Borg don't know what his race is, as he identifies the Vaadwaur. And he mentions in further conversation that there was a entire regiment of his people. He describes it in military terms.
I thought he said battalion.
Or maybe it was battalion. You're right. He describes the group as a military formation. He used some kind of language along those lines. And along with their weapons, like their fighters, like all the shit they need to equip themselves as weapons of war. And as he relates, the passing of his wife and her panic as the planet was being bombarded, he dismisses it in a very warrior ethos sort of way. The quotations that he used are essentially paraphrased from real world samurai literature. So there's this immediate pressure that builds in the characterization of the Vaadwaur in general, that they're militaristic and they're not openly like Snidely Whiplash mustache twirling evil, but they're not like the Federation in ethos from the beginning.
They do not come in peace, and they do not seem to prize mercy. And the no big deal tone that he said, oh yeah, this was my wife back on the surface. He kind of condemns his wife, saying it's a shame that she went out like such a coward and that she could not just accept fate and showed hesitation and this and that. And Janeway's kind of like, wow, that seems real cold. And then he'll go on to flesh it out a little bit. But, we'll later find out that these Vaadwaur, as children, are encouraged each night to go to bed thinking of how to die a different way. So there's
Very
a death cult element to them for sure.
And the family and militaristic regimentation is also very Cardassian.
Yeah, that's what you were saying.
Yeah, DS9 really establishes they are space fascists. Like, that is how their whole society has always been organized. So they are, in a lot of ways, not just physically resembling the both of them, but also in terms of their society. Although the headshot of Gedrin that they have here in Memory Alpha is so obviously trying to give them the visual aesthetic of a Cobra hood. That really was what they're going for with the neck ridges there, and to make them stink like in a very unique way. And not to shock you, this episode is the one that got nominated for an Emmy for hairstyling in a series.
Yeah, they've come a long way from the foam trash fest of the Kazon. So he recognizes 7 of 9 as Borg, even though it's ridiculous for him or the fried chicken people to know that she's Borg, because all she has is one thing on her eyebrow.
She's got a thing on her eye. She's clearly Borg.
Yeah.
Get him.
I'm assuming that your request for me not to look at the Memory Alpha focuses on this, and they dance around it. He says, oh, I've met a couple of Borg. Back in my time, the Borg had only assimilated a handful of systems. So I'm wondering, did the Klingassians, did the Vaadwaur create the Borg or have something to do with the Foundation? Like, nothing that I've ever seen has ever really touched on what the Borg are. And I'd like to throw some hypothesis or some conjecture out there that, I've always thought the Borg was a race, a cautionary tale about what happens when you over embrace technology, and that the Borg were a condition that a people did to themselves. But what if
the singularity taking over the biological imperative?
Yeah,
basically.
But what if the Borg were developed as slave labor, and instead of having people who would be resistant to it, you could just indoctrinate them and assimilate them into this program, and
it's
now
like a Cylon thing.
Kind of. Okay, we conquered you, and now we're, instead of enslaving you, you're going to be assimilated, and maybe, you'll like whatever life is in there. We'll force you to like it in this matrix-like construct, and then, you're going to build houses and spaceships for us. Slaves, indentured servants, a weapon. Hey, here's a hostile region. We don't want to fuck with it. So here's this nanoprobe virus, and it's going to basically make literally, we joke about space zombies, but the umbrella corporation of outer space is like, yeah, we're going to introduce the Borg virus and bring these solar systems under our sway, through that. So I think there's a lot of different ways they could go with Borg origin stories. And I think these guys are going to be a part of fleshing that out. And hopefully it's not going to be complete ass, but based on your earlier statements about what Voyager ultimately does to the Borg, I think that is a wrong assumption for me to make.
There's some other little hints about how oldie McOld Quadrant and his people are. They refer to Neelix's people as the Talexze, which is apparently the ancient form of Talaxian. Neelix relates that his people's ancient tongue had used the word Vodwar to represent foolishness. So it's all this hints of mythology of the different Delta Quadrant races that we have encountered is where the memory of the Vodwar live. I do take a little bit of issue with the fact that something that happened 900 years ago is now completely mythologized in spacefaring races rather than something that's known. Like, we here on Earth have a pretty decent idea of what was going on here in 1120 AD, right? 900 years ago prior to now. We have written records. We have a generally good idea of who ruled what, where, and what they were like. It strikes me as odd that everyone would be like, well, we don't know what happened 900 years ago, even though we all had space weapons and particle beams and all that shit back then, too. No one wrote it down.
We didn't know that CDs and DVDs had a shelf life and that stuff would, like, crumble after a while. So, yeah, we lost. We had put all of our family pictures.
Damn overwriter automatically erasing our history every 500 years. We're just missing shit now.
We put all the family photos on those old AOL discs we got free in the mail, and man, yeah, data rot. And again, it's very curious that the Borg of all people don't have complete files from back then, since 7 of 9 can seem to remember every other little trivial fact about how the chicken people's energy systems worked. So, you had a real bonehead moment out of Neelix there. Some real anti-ambassador moves saying, hey, yeah, your name means dumbass in my tongue, but
lack of empathy and emotion in the Vodwar is shown when the Skeletor people are starting to drop depth charges, and you do actually get, again, some cool exterior shots of like bombs hitting the already bombed out city as they try and dial it in. And Gendron's like, hey, just blow them up using our ancient spy satellite to see where they are up there. Shoot some more of your photon torpedoes. I know you have 87 of them next to all of your shuttlecraft. Just blow them all up. And Janeway's like, yeah, we're not kind of down for that sort of thing. And that's when they finally make the connection on the subspace corridors. And the deal is made where Gendron promises that they can get Janeway 1,000 light years closer to home in exchange for helping him wake up the rest of his people and help them get into the corridors as well, because they're the ones that originally found them and mapped them, and ultimately relate that their destruction was related to the jealousy of other races for their capture of that technology.
Seems legit. Solid story framework. Like, this is good sci-fi writing, especially out of Voyager. And all the pieces seem to
the
fit.
Vodwar are very well done, like very fleshed out. You get a real good sense of what they're about, so, even without a ton of detail.
Who's the story writing credits on this, and who's the director?
It is the Michael Taylor, Brendan Barriga, Joe Manowski trio Michael Taylor did the story, and it was directed by Winrich Kolbe, who's a old Trek hand. He's done a lot of Voyager episodes, not a lot of our favorites, to be honest. Uh, he did do Resistance and Eye of the Needle, though.
Yeah.
And he was also low key Kate Mulgrew's boyfriend, apparently the first few
Really?
seasons. Yeah, which is when he
Really?
got most of his work. Yeah.
Interesting. How curious that Robert Duncan McNeil admits that, from as much as he talks about Rick Colby on Delta Flyers. Very interesting. They start shooting them from orbit. Okay, so Janeway's decision to let the Skeletor people off the hook with just a light spanking, like, they're going to run off and get more friends. Like, the times, I guess, minus, Equinox, when she became, like, obsessed with murder, I guess she normally does err on the side of caution and show excessive mercy to those who would swing on Voyager's face.
I remember reading a review of Voyager at the time in a major publication, and she was described around this time as less a Starfleet captain, more a Democratic senator. This is literally what I read in like 1999. And specifically referencing her excessive mercy for others at the expense of her own people.
Yeah.
It just stuck with me for 20 years, having read that sentence. It was particularly true.
Janeway rightfully agrees to the proposal. It's an incredible opportunity for Voyager to make the journey home with some help of local geographical features, but also, you've got oppressed people who were driven to the brink of an extinction, and now she's got the chance to thaw them out. And this is a familiar theme for Voyager. Again, the thaw, and some other, situations where Voyagers come across a stranded civilization. So she says, yeah, let's do that. And they start waking up these soldiers out of their stasis pods and really investigating the full extent of the Bat Cave. And she's got Chakotay with her, and they go into this giant underground cavern, which, again, I've got a lot of warehouse experience. When they show the big map painting of the sprawling underground cavern full of fighter jets and stuff, I'm like, man, that's a lot of wasted vertical space. Like, you could have made a lot.
Look at all of that. They just made this cavern for no reason.
Yeah, you need some racks in there.
Yeah, like TIE fighters. It's perfect. That's the way the story arcs stay spacecraft.
Yeah. So Chakotay drops some ancient wisdom on us. This time it's classic Greco-Roman. Oh, dragon's teeth. When a dragon died on the battlefield, its teeth were scattered and warriors poured out. Okay, Chakotay. Thanks for that insight, buddy.
Hey, it's an ancient thing about warriors. We better have Chakotay say it. Like, no one else on this show is qualified to make this statement. It's too cultural.
While you're at it, why don't you tell everybody to put their tricorders away?
The Vaadwaur are getting woken up as we are introduced to a few more of the characters. There's essentially a kind of an administrative guy, and there's a clearly more military-oriented leader, and Gadrin is still kind of in charge of the group, but who might outrank who is never firmly established in terms of their hierarchy.
All you need to know about these guys is everybody has jack boots on except for Gedrin.
Yeah.
And that tells you right there that, yes, in true Voyager fashion, the wardrobe language tells you without a doubt these are space Nazis and there will be blood.
You are in the Delta Quadrant. You should always default to you're probably a space Nazi until proven otherwise.
You're either a space Nazi or super trash. Now, you might have said, hey, listen, these guys don't have standing collars, and usually it takes standing collars and jack boots, but yeah, because of the Viper-like features of their neck flare.
They're built in. They're built in.
The Klingassians. Yeah, definite space Nazis. The one guy in particular, and I didn't catch his name, but he's like basically the General Zod of the group. this guy like is,
that's a good way of describing him. He's clearly the most militaristic of them.
yeah, and he's the guy who later on be like, we're gonna double cross Voyager and we're gonna kill all of them and you know, rain blood and fire and rebuild our civilization on the skulls of all those who stand. But whatever. Oh, okay, Space Odd. But that guy, just the way his face looked and his composure was like especially evil. But yeah, Gedrin not necessarily part of the SS on this, and I don't really understand what that power dynamic is. If he was like civilian leadership or a scientist or what, but yeah, it's clear he's got some pull, but he's not in uniform.
Gul is the name of the one that is the militaristic one, which kind of makes sense.
Gul Dukat, yeah, like right on the fucking nose, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's as I mentioned, they don't tell you a ton of detail, but you get a sense of what's going on with these guys without it. The whole bunch of them come up to, I think, astrometrics, and they talk about the subspace corridors, and they mention that they never wrote anything down about them for operational security reasons, but they are happy to chart them a course. They start to go through kind of the processes they're going to follow to get everyone awake, and then they're essentially going to just Zerg rush the Skeletor people. They're just going to roll out in force, engage them in a quick firefight, and then make the way to the subspace corridors and bounce, because the Vaudoir know about ones that Teray may not have any idea. So that's the plan. Pretty basic. Tuvok's tactical thinking is it's not exactly focused on any kind of diversion here. It's just bum rush and get the fuck out.
Now, the Vaudoir are very quick to call attention to the fact that as great as their stuff used to be, it's all 900 years out of date. And they're flying around in a bunch of antiques at this point. They're very focused and tech envious. They want Voyager's photon torpedoes. They want to appropriate stuff left and right. Janeway's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. We got real strict rules. We're going to do it my way, or, it's not going to happen at all. So she does a fair amount of arm twisting. In the process, we get a side scene with Naomi Wildman, who I could have done without, but again, it's a nice point for Neelix to shine. And she, in case you're not picking up on the breadcrumbs, she's telling us about what little evil assholes the Vaudoir children are, how they're making fun of Neelix and saying he's a rat, and all this other true stuff.
the space Hitler youth,
yeah.
Like mm-hmm. they're not good people. Okay, we got it.
So, do we ever see Samantha Wildman again, or is she just the absent mother from here out, and you only see Naomi?
I think she's occasionally a background extra at the most. I don't think she's ever has another speaking line on the show.
Ouch.
Yeah. Talking getting replaced. They have such an aversion to using guest actors on the show. It's so weird. You've decided you want Naomi Wildman to be a recurring character, but not our mom ever? Come on. That's weird.
I think that's an astrometric scene too, where, and again, anytime Voyager talks about its own past adventures, or a lot of these one-off throwaway races, if the writers room bring them back up, like they're looking at their old colonies and trying to map out where they're going to go and reestablish themselves, and a lot of their holdings were in what has now become Devor territory, and those were the authoritarians who hated telepaths. And I'm like, I don't know, these guys seem like they get along pretty well, but a little bit of a trip down memory lane, and more discussions about what the Delta Quadrant used to be. And I enjoyed all that stuff. Them talking about the different races that we've encountered, but what they knew of them 900 years ago. So again, a lot of cool world building through the time travel that these guys do.
The way they go through this piece by piece is that they have first a scene where B'Elanna is working with them to wake them up, and that's when they kind of hear more about their Klingon-esque, you must think of the ways you're going to die kind of philosophy, and that they jived with like reading about the Klingons in the Federation database. Neelix starts to review more Talaxian folklore about what the Vaadwaur were, like what records are there of them as he gets more suspicious, and the the ask for the weapons is made, and Janeway turns him down, and we start to see some of the backstabby nature of Vaadwaur themselves come to light, because they have a conversation on their own in the Batcave, where they say, well, you know what, we need new technology, so let's take it off of Voyager, and instead of attacking Teray, we'll ambush them, take the ship over, and then we'll use this to get the hell out of here, and then expand our technological knowledge from there.
It's a little two-dimensional, but it also serves its purpose. General Zod is the thrust behind this double cross, and I don't know, the blocking for how this works out is kind of silly. Like, they're talking under a catwalk, and you've got Starfleet guys walking above, but whatever. So they lay out the plan that they're going to double cross them. Now, what they don't know, Joe, is that Catherine Janeway has a jump to conclusions mat. And
well, she doesn't have a jump to conclusions mat. I think that's a little unfair, because they do have a couple scenes where they establish why she becomes suspicious.
She gets an earful from Seven of Nine and from Neelix saying, hey, these guys, they've got some dubious mentions in a couple folklores from the surrounding areas, which Seven of Nine even having records of that seems...
No, well, I think you're selling it short. I really do. They start with the scene where Quadrant and Seven are looking for a planet for the Vaadwaur to settle, and they're like going through the history of the Delta Quadrant stuff that you mentioned, of like, how about this colony? Oh no, this race that we ran into in season 4 has it now. Like, you get to hear about how different things are, and it's how frustrating it is for the Vaadwaur to hear. And that's also where you get a little bit more information about why Seven wants to help them. Like, her focus is on trying to resettle these people, and she starts to vocalize more about why she woke them up, because, like, as a Borg, all I've ever done is destroy civilizations. I'd like to rebuild one for a change. And that's when she gets called in to talk to Neelix, who's like, hey, listen, I went through everything I've got on Talaxian fairy tales, all of my cheese recipes that are meant as bioweapons. I've been through it all. And the Vaadwaur come up a lot, but as like the fucking bad guys every time. And what I thought was so cool is she says, like, you're Borg. You have the folklore and history of not just the Borg, but every race the Borg ever assimilated. So how about you cross-reference our folklore with all of the information from the past of all of the races the Borg ate, and see if there's cross-references that are made that line up. Like, is this a uniquely Talaxian thing, or is there like a history of everyone in the Delta Quadrant knowing these guys were assholes? And I thought that was such a cool piece of connective tissue, where they directly say, oh, let's use Seven of Nine being the smartest person in the entire galaxy to our advantage. And it's Neelix who does it all on his own.
It is cool, and all that stuff does work well, and it's great connective tissue. My counter argument to that is that we've established earlier that superstition and folkloresy tale and stuff like that, the Borg does not classify as a scientific asset, and usually dumps out of the collective thought. So that kind of folksy stuff really shouldn't be bouncing around in her head, but whatever. It tells a cool story.
But we know that was bullshit from Seven of Nine, who was just uncomfortable with it, because the other Borg demonstrated that knowledge.
Which one? When?
In the No Social Distancing episode.
No, there was another one where they're talking about like creation myths or something. Maybe it was Omega Particle. It was Omega Particle. Yeah.
Yes.
It was Omega Directive, and she's saying that, normally creation myth and shit like that gets tossed out of the collective's memory, but because there were scientific elements to so many of these, that we kept it around and found Omega Particles and fucked up or whatever. But even if you've got Janeway getting briefed from 7 to 9 and Neelix saying, hey, listen, these guys might be kind of treacherous, like, the way she moves forward with such certainty when she confronts Gedrin and says, like, yeah, you guys are pieces of shit and I don't trust you anymore. And we're going to order, all but 10 of the ships to turn off. Like, she chooses to act on the suspicions of Neelix and 7 and 9 with a certainty that only a metagamer could have.
Well, I think that it's not metagaming because we saw all of the other warning signs from this point, right? Like the militaristic worldview, the jack boots, the lack of caring that his wife died. Hey, why don't you blow those dudes up? Like, there's been little signs of like, I think these guys might be shit. And having a little bit more confirmation makes it, I think, a reasonable thing to say. You guys kind of seemed like shit, and it turns out there's a lot of historical records, apocryphal ones, but still records that suggest you're shit. So I think you guys are shit. I think it's all right. That's fair.
So now you got your double agent, or soon-to-be double agent, Gedrin, and his counterpart, General Zod. Janeway doesn't really seem to do anything to me to justify the heel face turn that Gedrin does. Like, he comes to his senses and becomes a good guy at the end, but it's really out of place. And if there was like a genuine connection between the two of them, something along the lines of what we saw in the Devor, Janeway falls in love with the other space Nazi who hates telepaths, like,
an episode that's referenced in this episode. They talk about the Devor Imperium as one of the powers that took over the Vodwar's colonies.
Yeah. But, Gedrin seems to come to his senses a little too easy. So Janeway leaves the ready room with her meeting after she tells Gedrin what's up, that she's read ahead in the script and she knows a double cross is coming. They get General Zod on the phone and she's like, listen, only 10 of your craft, which you've gone out of your way many times to call attack fighters, not your peaceful escape craft.
Peaceful hug fighters.
Yeah, no.
Cuddly dog fighters.
Our drive-by vehicles. She's like, look, only 10 of them are going to be involved in the plan to thwart the Skeletor fleet from causing blockade. Have everybody else turn their guns off. And he's like, no. And she's like, yeah, or else. And she gets off the phone with him and she says, you know what? Fuck it. We're leaving now. Like I said, I read ahead in the script. I know it's going to happen. There's a exchange between General Zod and Gedrin. And I've always wondered, like, what does the other person see when they're talking to the Voyager crew on, like, the main view screen? Like, do you only get to see Janeway, or do you see, like, the whole view? But in this scene, General Zod, like, looks right at Gedrin. And there's kind of like this accusation, like, you asshole, you fucking told her that we're going to stab her in the back. Like, I see how it is. And I think that's what makes him escalate the timeline on his end as well.
It is all missing just a little bit of development. I think they were close. It's not as bad as last week with the Fox Mulder character deciding out of nowhere that, he's just going to totally sacrifice his life's ambition on behalf of Voyager, specifically Tuvok, someone by definition he doesn't know. But it is still a little unearned and a little sudden. But
I'm nitpicking this thing. It's all forgivable. It's far from the worst.
Oh God, this is so much better than everything we've watched this season, aside from the premiere.
Even maybe better than the premiere too. Like, I'm being nitpicky, but it's because there's enough good stuff here that it's worth exploring the shortcomings.
We're being nitpicky because it's our brand. It's like people come here for that. I know that they don't want to hear us just absolutely tongue all over this thing. They want a little bit of the realness. That's what we offer. That's what we market here. It's okay. This episode is good. You should watch it. Now here's all of the shitty things we found that was wrong with it.
Here's mean nerds. So Voyager's like, all right, we need to get the fuck out of here. They go to lift off, and the General Zod in 1980s ninja fight fashion starts slowly dispatching wave after wave of small clusters of fighters to stop Voyager. Rather than just sending all the dudes out at once and like gunning her down, he sends like 10 at a time. And Voyager, where they had reservation about blowing the Skeletors out of the sky, has no reservations about fucking up the Klingassian attack fighters.
Really, really cool fight sequence, though, with the multiple phaser arrays, fighting off the different small fighters as Voyager tries to rise out of the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Neat visuals.
I have it listed in my notes as dope escape fight. And
that is what it was.
It's sad that stuff like this stands out as much as it does. Again, I don't think there's anything here that's really like, wow, oh my God, this is better than Star Wars. Like, it's shit you probably would have seen in Babylon 5, and I'm certain that you see in Deep Space Nine, but this is just stuff you don't ever get to see on Voyager, and certainly not at this quality, and it makes it stand out and keeps it memorable, and I appreciate having it. And I don't know, Voyager's not ultimately a show about space war, so that's why we don't get more of it, I guess, but it's cool when you do.
They contact the Skeletor people and say, hey, we accidentally woke up the space Hitlers. Would you please help? And that's when Gedrin makes his heel turn to face to say, all right, guys, I'll totally help by going back down to the surface with Tuvok, temporarily until Tuvok can dramatically leave to help guide the Skeletor bombs. So that Voyager, who's getting the shit kicked out of it now by 900-year-old fighters, not their weak, can safely escape. And this plan is successful. One last trick by Janeway to take up all of the gamma radiation in the atmosphere, turn themselves into the Incredible Hulk, totally not get cancer to power the ship after they lose main power, but they get out of the atmosphere, and the Vaudoir are seen starting to try and blockade run the Terrae, and Voyager's like, fuck this, and just warps away.
Look at this huge mess we made. We just stepped in dog shit, and not only did we come into your living room and walk all over the carpet with it, but we also laid on our back and put dog shit footprints all over the walls and windows, too.
Please rate us on Nextdoor. Bye. No wonder we still wonder why people hate us.
The two nacelles on the side of Voyager may as well just be middle fingers.
We were just happening across this part of the galaxy, wandered into someone's private property, moopsed our way onto this planet, and then woke up a bunch of space Hitlers that everyone had to band together 900 years ago to vanquish, and immediately start shit with everyone around them.
Oh, look, we found Soren's army. Don't mind us. We're going to get out of here. A lot of cool stuff happens in a minimal amount of time here.
This episode's tight, man. There's not a wasted moment.
Yeah, Gedrin's heel face turn, like, it's not just, okay, I'll help you guys. It's, I'm going to betray everything that's left of my people. I'm going to take this military satellite that's been our only edge in this fight with the Skeletor people, and I'm going to give it to the Skeletor people so they can start blowing up my friends and their families down on the surface. Like, some real shitty shit. And then, like you said, they beam down. He's got Tuvok with him for a minute, which, again, it seems like a bad time for Tuvok to be leaving the bridge, but that's Tuvok. And then, the cave starts rumbling and concrete and shit's falling down from the top. And he's like, I'm going to stay here and make sure that, the Skeletors really have every available opportunity to genocide us, but you should go. And then Tuvok puts up 0.0% fight and just fucking...
He's like, yeah, I barely know you, so yeah, I'm out of here.
Not even goodbye. He's just like, and I'm out. Boop. Deuces. There's a fun line where General Zod's talking to someone, and he's like, yeah, listen, after we take over Voyager, execute everybody. I'm like, oh, damn, that's cold. That's cold. But then they're like, well, hey, we got all these stasis pods. He's like, yeah, go ahead and just jam them in the stasis pods instead. We're going to pull some fucking some Kazon shit and leave them stranded on a crappy planet, and we'll see if anybody wants to help them out in 900 years. And I was like,
yeah, they got this cool program with this clown that they recovered a while back. We'll just throw that in there, keep them company. It'll be good times. If they had taken out the scene with Naomi Wildman and just had one more development scene specifically with Gedrin, like why he and how he connects with everybody, I think they could have solved that problem. It wouldn't have taken much.
Absolutely. That's a great point. You could have absolutely thrown that fucking scene out It could have been Gedrin bonding with Neelix and just something to pull his head out of his ass just a little bit. Because keep in mind, all of these guys, it's felt like they were like in a dream and they just woke up. It's not like, oh God, I got summoning sickness and I could tell it's been so long. Like for all these people, they just took a nap and woke up. Like they're in the middle of a fucking war and everybody's like allegiance to the cause should be 110%. So that's a loose, a weak part of the episode. Again, it's not a showstopper, but this is a great episode to really just highlight Voyager's meddling potential. Like I would say, short of Janeway letting the Borg live in Scorpion, this is probably the biggest dick move that they have pulled in the entire run of the show.
To wrap up our discussion, they have the scene at the end where Seven's like, "Oh man, shouldn't have done that." Janeway's like, "You're probably right." There is something I wanted to share with you since you didn't read the Memory Alpha that kind of sets the stage for what happens next. You ready?
Sure.
Although the final scene heavily implies that the Vaudois would become a recurring antagonist to the crew, they did not appear again after this episode.
Come on, what?
I'm not kidding you. All of this setup, that teaser at the end, this entire episode's premise of setting up this new race, this threat that gets into the galaxy that Voyager is culpable for, all of this work that they do. And they literally never show up in this show.
Dude, are you fucking
ever? I'm not kidding you.
Exactly what I said. Like, this feels like a special, like, there's the regular, I don't know if you remember Mask, right?
Oh yeah, I loved Mask. I had two of the Mask cars.
Like, okay, we're gonna move away from Venom as the bad guy, or let's G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe, we've been fighting Cobra for years, and now we're gonna roll out a new threat, and it's going to be snake people from outer space. And here's a special 1 hour, because it's half an hour. Well, here's a special 1 hour series premiere or season premiere where here's the new bad guy, and this is the threat, and here's the action figures, and this is going to be lingering repercussions and consequences to the end for G.I. Joe. Like that's exactly what it felt like in this. This is a big money episode, very clearly. Lots of costumes, lots of sets, lots and lots of money into CGI budget, and you're going to tell me that they're never going to use it again? Like, what a fucking botch. You've got a great story. These guys are thought out. You've got cool throwback shit to 900 years ago that could be involved here. Like, this is the Skeevians all over again. The Skeevians back in, what the hell are they really called? Whatever.
I don't, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Vlad Goldblum and the Skeevians back in season 1, they were supposed to be persistent antagonists along with the Kazon, right? And the Phage guys, the Vidians. And the Vidians hung around for a little bit, and certainly we got a lot of Kazon, but the Skeevians, they just dropped them like a hot potato. And to me personally, I think the Skeevians would have been the best antagonist or just alien race period that Voyager could have produced. And for you to fucking tell me that we're never going to see the Klingassians again, like, what a goddamn shame. Like, who, how, who, why?
This is why I didn't want you to read the Memory Alpha, because I just wanted your untainted reaction for the first hour of everything that they do, the work overtime to set this so much up with this episode and leave all these unanswered questions, only to just simply never use them ever again in any way aside from like a name check, like a season from now.
I would have bet money that these guys were the ones who built the board.
I know. And so does every Voyager fan. This episode is notorious for being like, man, that was really cool. Why the fuck didn't they use them ever again after that?
You're going to give me Barge of the Dead and all this other fucking hokey, shitty, garbage episodes. And then there's cool stuff here, and you're never going to touch again. Like, fuck Voyager, man, for real.
This is the kind of hate, like, it feels so pure. I'm so glad I made this happen. It's just in my veins,
man. Like,
yes, keep going.
Well,
Oh no,
Good
we've
luck.
entered the resignation stage.
Yeah, good luck to General Zod and whatever conquests he and his jackbooted Klingassian Cobra people go on to inflict upon the Delta Quadrant. Back to and you don't even see if Gendron really dies either. So
you see like the POV shot of the rubble hitting him.
Yeah, but look, he might as well have just fallen off a bridge in Star Wars. Like, people don't die from falling in Star Wars, and people don't die from rubble falling in Star Trek. Just look at Worf. How many times did he get covered by rocks? And just Jenna trying to replicate that spine right back in. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, and I don't even want to think about it anymore. This is just.
I'm sorry, I ruined something beautiful for you.
What a turd.
I'm sorry. But you know what? I had to get your hopes up so that I could crush them. That's what the people want.
Season 6, episode 8. We're going to be going for One Small Step, and there's a real exciting picture of Paris and Kim sitting in the briefing room. Voyager encounters a graviton eclipse, a dangerous phenomenon that emerges from a subspace on rare occasions. I don't care. I want the fucking Klingon.
Never used again, Peter. Never used.
I don't care about Tom Paris falling in love with a shuttlecraft and trying to fly into a cosmic string fragment. I care about persistent villains and high stakes. Like, yuck.
If you can stand to emerge from the disappointment that I have led you down, Peter, we'll see you next week. How about that, buddy?
Yeah. Listen, man, I'll tell you what, whatever shame and anger Voyager has put on me, I'll just shrug off as I stroll into Night City and take a page out of 7 and 9's book and just shoot the joint up.